All right, let me know if you've ever had this situation. You're heading towards a climb, your buddy's up ahead of you, they're halfway up the climb, you know you can make this, you're gonna punch it, you get to that bottom of the climb and you hammer down. 2 strokes in, your gear slips, and your friend looks back at you and thinks, did that guy just try and shift with the power down? But what actually happened is your derailleur was not aligned properly and it derailed when you did not want it to. If that's something that's happened to you or you've broken a chain because of that, then this video is for you, and I'm going to show you my steps in preparing the derailleur and indexing the gears before a ride or after a ride in a short 5-10 minute time frame. All right, let's get into it. Before I do anything is I want to make sure all the components are tight here, right? So I don't want that cable slipping and I don't want the derailleur having any adjustment outside of what it does on its own. So on here, the derailleur is attached here into the derailleur hanger. And the hanger, which is this little piece here, which I recommend you buy a spare one if you can, because there's so many different types. When you need one, it'll be hard to find, especially when it's broken into pieces. So having an extra one of those, I got one on my pegboard. The derailleur hanger connects to the frame actually on the back side here, so I'll have to take off the wheel to get it. And then the only other spots you really want to make sure you're tightening are there's a bolt here that tightens to the cable. You don't want that slipping. That's going to cause poor adjustments. Things you don't want to touch as like, okay, let's make these tight, are things like this B-tension screw, which adjusts the height of the pulley wheel. And on the back here, you don't want to adjust any of these screws here. So underneath this 11-speed on mine, typically they'll have an H and an L by them. That's high and low, and what those are the limit screws, and you don't want to mess with those unless you know you're messing with those. So do not touch this one, do not touch these two, and I'll get into everything else. So right away, I will make sure this is snug. So it's not that one, so it's actually a 4. Interesting. So it's in all the way, and I'm not gonna over tighten it, so it's tight to that cable, that's good. The other one I said was where the derailleur connects to the hanger. On mine, that's a 5. And we just want to make sure that's snug. Again, not over tightening, just making sure there's not any play in it. The other one is going to be the derailleur hanger itself. So it's connected to the rear triangle here at this point. Now on my optic here, it's kind of a unique one. It's actually behind that I have to get at. So I have to shift it down. And when I take off the rear wheel, I always drop it to the lowest chain, and then I can get around, I'll take it out and I can get around and tighten the other one. So that's what I'll do. Boom. Keep it somewhere not dirty, pull out. So on the back here, this is my derailleur hanger. And like I said before, I recommend just having an extra one of these around. This is a pretty common thing to break in a crash. So you want to have an extra one just in case you need to replace it, because once it's broken in half, it's going to be hard to figure out which one there is, and there's dozens of different types of derailleur hangers. So there's just this one little screw here that I want to make sure is nice and snug. I'm not wrenching on it at all. It's a tiny screw, so I'm basically just taking 2 fingers and making sure that's nice and snug. So now that I know the derailleur is attached to the hanger and the hanger is attached to the frame, nice and snug, you'll notice that there is some play in it here, but that's part of the design. So it's actually got a stop on it and that way. So that's all good to go. I'm feeling confident in that. So I'll put the wheel back on here. Pull down the cage. Get it around that bottom one because I know that's the gear it was in. Back up and in. All right, so something that's really important that I found actually riding was that the way these bikes are designed, and this one especially, the rear triangle here, this guy, is designed so that this through axle that I'm putting through the wheel is a structural component of this whole frame. So if that gets loose, if this through axle becomes loose, it's gonna affect how the bike shifts. So I was out riding and I was losing my mind because usually I can adjust with the barrel adjuster up top, and it just wasn't shifting right. Every time I put some power down, it would shift improperly and it felt really, really odd. Yeah, so what I found was that this was actually the component that was loose. So really making sure this through axle is nice and tight and fitting properly all the way through. It's nice and snug. So now I'm at a point where the derailleur, I'm confident in the derailleur and the wheel and the entire structure back here that it's going to be in a good position to make the adjustments, and it's going to stay that way when I go for a ride, even if I have to remove the wheel to get it in a car or something. I know putting it back on, everything will be lined up the way I want it to. So what I'm going to do first is you're going to need a stand. That's definitely something you're going to want, but I'm going to shift up and it's going okay. Now this is something that just takes so much time to be able to hear the right things. It's like those people that watch bird watch. They can tell the type of bird just from the sound, and they can tell the differences between similar sounding birds. That's kind of like a bike mechanic here. So you can see there, when I was shifting, that little click meant it was hesitating. So it was a little slow there. I'll make it a little worse so it's easier to tell. But when I go up, there's a hesitation. Up, hesitation. And I'm just playing with this one here because that's where I saw that issue. I'll make it a little worse again. So that's it. So watch, see if I go up, it doesn't want to stay up there. It's kind of dropping down. So if I was actually pedaling on the bike, it would be doing that under load, and it would be the most annoying sound for me and anyone I'm riding with, right? So what I want to do here, I'll go down to the third ring there. So now it's there, and it's fine. It's all good, right? It's just when I want to shift into that easier gear, it doesn't want to. That's super annoying. So what do? So back down to the one that's good. I'll stop the wheel and I'll come up here to the front. So at the front here on this derailleur setup, sometimes there's a barrel adjuster here. This one doesn't have that. There's only one barrel adjuster and it's up by the front here. So this is what I'm going to be adjusting, and I'll get a better shot of it after. So if I twist it, if I'm looking into the shifter and I twist it clockwise, what that's going to do is it's going to loosen the cable. So it's going to make it easier to drop down. Now, since it wasn't going up, I want it tighter to bring it up. And this is something that just takes so much practice when you're doing this. So counterclockwise is going to tighten it. So that's what I'm going to do with my hand while I'm up here. And I just have to think of it properly, but I'm doing it counterclockwise. I give it a couple turns. I try it again. Goes up. Now it's better, but it's still clicking. And there's that hesitation. And I'm just playing with these two gears. Still that hesitation. So I'm going to give it another couple little turns. There's that hesitation again. It doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like much on the stand here, but if I was riding, it would make that clicking grind. It wouldn't allow my derailleur to get it into that next gear. So that's good. Now I'm going to go down further and try it from the bottom again. So one click, should be in. Now I'm just listening for those clicks to see if it's hesitating or if it's trying to jump into the next gear. It's making some clicking. And as the tension gets stronger on the derailleur, I'm going to know a little better in these top gears or low gears with all that tension which way it's going. Now this is slower than I would normally do it, but take your time, do it more often. So it seems like it's good. So I'm gonna go 2 down at a time. Good. Now, the way this shifter works is it'll do 2 or 3 jumps and gear changes at a time. So I'm gonna make sure those are working, because that's where you're really applying a lot of tension on this cable. It's going into the housing, going into the derailleur. That's where you're gonna sometimes find those, especially if you like, think about when you're coming up to the bottom of that hill and you're slamming your gears up to try and get into that climbing gear. That's when things are gonna kind of start to happen, or if you're under a little bit of load. There's no load on the tire here, but that's something you're gonna wanna watch out for. So 3 clicks, 3 again, 3 again. See, now I've added that. What I've done is I've added that tension to the derailleur by slamming it a little more. And that created a lot more tension, and that kind of loosened up this cable again. So now I'm loose again. So there was that hesitation, so I'm gonna tighten it a little bit. So counterclockwise on the cable. What's happening there? Okay, so there's a good example. So now it's almost trying to go up too high. It tries to jump in the next gear, so that was a little too far, so I'm gonna turn it clockwise, just 1 click at a time, to make sure it's dropping to the right spot. Perfect. It's hesitating, so I'm gonna go click again. Okay, I'm gonna start from the bottom, all the way down now, and I'm gonna hammer it. There, as far as it goes, all the way back down, 2, 3, just to get all the tension out of it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. A little hesitation, but I was also pretty hard on it. Perfect. So that's good. So that's kind of what you can do to get your derailleur set up so that it's shifting properly. Now, when I ride it out on the trails, I'm going to be applying more load because I'm going to be in the saddle. I'm going to have weight on the suspension. That's going to affect how things work. And if I'm going up a little hill and I'm shifting, that's where I'm really going to find if it's dialed. And that's where memorizing and really understanding which way to turn that barrel adjuster at the front lever here tightens and loosens the cable that runs through the housing, and what that in turn does here. Yeah, all right, so that's my quick tutorial on kind of a 5-minute indexing of gear setup before a ride or after a ride. It takes time. It's incredible how hard it is to have an ear and an eye and a feel for how that chain's reacting, because it's really, really important, because once you're out there riding and you have the same kind of little problems, it's back to the same points. Make sure all the components are tight. If those are all tight, then make sure this hasn't been worn, or there's not a bend in the chain or something weird like that. Past that, you're just going to try and adjust that barrel adjuster. So it's really important to understand tensioning and detensioning of the cable in the housing to the derailleur at that barrel adjuster and the shifter at your handlebars. So knowing that, looking into basically to the end of your handlebars, looking into the shifter, clockwise loosens. Counterclockwise, added tension. Added tension helps it go up. Loosening helps it go down. And you're not adjusting the limits ever, unless you know you're adjusting the limits. That's super crucial, and it just takes time, but that's what the bike shop is there for too, right? If you don't know, if you can't figure it out, you can't get past this, take it to a bike shop. But that's it, and I hope you learned something. This is kind of just my way of doing it, but it's worked for me, is how I was taught, and I haven't been taught otherwise from other shops yet. So yeah, hopefully that helps you guys out. Get out there.